Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new Ninjago video here on the channel. My name is TannerFishies. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at a cancelled Ninjago set and a potential plot point for the Ninjago TV series that may have been cancelled as well. As far as we know though, the actual set itself was the only thing that was cancelled because it didn't really fit within the context of the Ninjago TV series. The set itself is known as set number 70630, the Monastery of Ice, and we're going to be taking a look at that set here in a moment, but I think it's important to establish a little bit of context first surrounding what the set would have entailed. So like I said, the set was called the Monastery of Ice, and before it was cancelled, it would have involved the ninja visiting the home of a scientist who apparently was supposed to be combining elemental powers in a laboratory of some kind, which is, in and of itself, a super interesting concept that we're going to be talking about a little bit more later on in the video, so stay tuned for that. But the reason why this set was cancelled is because it was never actually realized for the Ninjago TV series, meaning the plot point surrounding the elemental powers mixing and a mad scientist was never actually finalized for the Ninjago TV show, and as a result, the set was cancelled. However, looking at the actual set itself, I believe we can actually piece things together and make it work within the context of the TV show, so let's go ahead and take a look at the set in question. So here we have the actual set in question, and as I'm sure you guys can tell, this was probably going to happen at some point during Ninjago's Sons of Garmadon. Just based on the ninja's attire and some of the outfits presented in this set, I believe this would have taken place at some point during Season 8, or maybe towards the end of Season 9, but most likely towards the beginning of Season 8. As you can see, we have Lloyd in his very traditional Sons of Garmadon outfit. Zane as well is also in his Sons of Garmadon outfit, almost complete. Like I said, this is an early concept set, so some of the faces are a little bit wrong there. That's totally fine. But overall, for Lloyd and Zane, and just based on some of the other ninja, I'd say this was going to happen at some point during Ninjago Season 8. And I love how these outfits look. Can we talk about that first things first? I love the idea of combining the Sons of Garmadon outfits with simple snowy attire, simple warm clothes to wear during the winter. Like Kai just has a scarf, Nia has a jacket and a scarf, etc, etc. I think that's an awesome idea. Not sure why Lloyd doesn't have anything, not sure why Zane is wearing, what is that, a scarf? Can't really tell behind the bow. But still, why does Zane have a scarf if he's the Master of Ice? Who really knows? But overall, I like the ninja outfits. I think these would have been cool to see in the early stages of Sons of Garmadon. Maybe in the first episode. In fact, maybe this could have been a concept that would have been in that first episode as Lloyd tries to get the team back together. Maybe the other 5 ninja were in the process of raiding this temple when Lloyd shows up and helps them out, and that's why they all come back together. Perhaps, who's really to say? I just think this scene would have fit in within that first episode of Sons of Garmadon, maybe replacing some of those other scenes like the ones with Jay and Cole, or the ones with Kai and Zane. I think the ninja team starting off as a team would have been cool to see. Speaking of which, I feel like they would have been going up against this guy right here, which of course is the unknown scientist that we talked about earlier. Now, in terms of this guy's design, I don't really know what to say about him. He doesn't really seem all that special to me. Just a random scientist, perhaps, maybe just another nameless villain. Maybe somebody like the mechanic, who would have started off their reign as a lower scale villain, as a small tier villain, but maybe later on they could have worked their way up the food chain, maybe become a real, legitimate evil villain later on, just like the mechanic. But overall, this scientist doesn't look too bad either. He's just not really my favorite character. Don't really have a whole lot to say about him. He doesn't look like anybody familiar, so he probably would have been a new character. But still, that's our scientist, and the set also does include these 2 skeletons over here, who I don't think have any significance except for the fact that maybe they could have been ice-themed skeletons, maybe perhaps infused with the elemental power of ice, as we can see from these blades and some of the pieces on the skeletons being really ice-themed. Maybe these would have been ice-powered skeletons that the ninja would have had to beat. Who's really to say? Either way, the skeletons look interesting, the scientist guy looks unique as well, but those ninja minifigures are by far the best minifigures in this set, at least according to my own opinion. The set itself, as you can see here, is rather nice, and I do plan on making an entire video later on talking about cancelled Ninjago sets. This one will probably show up in that video as well, so I don't want to spend too much time on the actual design of the set, but as you can see here, this very much is a really awesome design for an ice temple. The ninja could have traveled here perhaps during the opening scenes of Sons of Garmadon and confronted the evil scientist guy mixing elemental powers in his lab, which as you can see, we very much have a mixing station right here. Looks to be maybe energy or nature, fire and water or ice perhaps. And yeah, just zooming in a little bit more, he does appear to be mixing something with fire and maybe ice or water. Is that energy? Is that nature? Some other green element, maybe poison, who's really to say? But he has this lab down here, probably works in the lab mixing elemental powers. There is a skeleton down there as well. Perhaps he's experimenting on the skeletons, trying to bring them back to life infused with elemental powers. That could always be the case too. And if that happened, that probably would have been a reference to the early Skullkin from Ninjago, which actually did have elemental powers. powers before Ninjago realized that that's not how powers worked. I'm getting a little bit too distracted here. This elemental power mixing station thing looks to be a pretty interesting concept. Would have loved to have seen that actually be used in Ninjago, though I kind of feel like if they were to have used that at some point, they possibly would have used that during Ninjago Season 4, as that season was all about elemental powers. Maybe they could have been mixing elements there, but I digress. I think this mixing station is really cool. The idea of mixing elemental powers is also super awesome in my opinion, and that would have made for an interesting plot to include during Ninjago Season 8. Like I said, guys, it's a pretty big shame that this set never actually ended up being produced, and more importantly, it's quite a shame that this plot point never saw the light of day either. The concept of a mad scientist mixing elemental powers and potentially experimenting on skeletons to utilize those powers is a very fascinating concept in my opinion. I think that would have been right at home for the Ninjago series, and like I said, maybe they could have started small with this villain. Maybe the mad scientist could have been at a smaller scale, but eventually, maybe in later seasons, he would have become a larger, more greater threat to the ninja themselves, especially if he knows how to capture and mix elemental powers, which capturing elemental powers, how would that work? Possibly using Chrono Steel. I mean, we've seen Chrono Steel trap elemental powers before, as was the case with the Time Power and the Time Blades, so maybe he was using Chrono Steel to capture powers from elemental masters and possibly mix them together, experiment with them. I think that could have made for an interesting story, and honestly that has the potential to be a storyline for an entire dedicated season if LEGO wants to do that. And if LEGO ever decided to do that one day, I would totally be okay with that. I think a story about a mad scientist mixing powers would have been amazing, and it would have been awesome to see the ninja try to combat this guy. Like I said earlier though, maybe Season 4 would have been the correct setting for this plot point to take place, but I still feel as though Ninjago could utilize this one day if they truly wanted to, and in a way, I really hope that they do. I think there's a lot of untapped potential here, especially with the monastery itself. Would have loved to have seen that as an actual set, but like I said though, I will be making another video later on, possibly this weekend, talking about that set in great detail, along with several other cancelled Ninjago sets, so of course, stay tuned for that, and in the meantime guys, that'll pretty much wrap it up for my thoughts here. Thank you so much for watching everybody. I am very curious to hear what you guys have to say regarding this cancelled Ninjago set, and the potential story that would have went along with it, and what would you have loved to have seen for this storyline? And in which season do you think this storyline would have been more suited to appear in? Do you think this should have been at the beginning of Sons of Garmadon, or do you think this should have been in something like Season 4, as elemental powers were the primary focus of that season? Like I said, I personally think either one would have worked if LEGO wanted to do that, or if LEGO ever decides to do that at some point in the future. I think the options are very much open for this plot point to return one day, and fingers crossed that it does. Leave all your thoughts down below, and feel free to leave all of your thoughts down below as well regarding the set in question. Thank you so much for watching everybody. If you guys enjoyed today's video, feel free to like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will talk to you guys again really soon. Peace.